I want to start with the experiment that probably should have happened much earlier. Take a plastic bag full of chopped fruit and vegetables, put it over a glass, and squeeze.
That is the experiment?
That is the experiment. Because the company we are talking about raised more than $100 million, employed dozens of engineers and scientists, built a huge fresh food operation, designed a machine capable of applying thousands of pounds of force, connected it to Wi-Fi, gave it a QR scanner, and sold it for $699. And then somebody squeezed the bag with their hands.
And the hands won.
More or less.
Good. Episode over.
No, because if the lesson is just rich people funded a stupid juicer, we learn almost nothing. The interesting question is how you get there. How do a founder who actually knows the juice business, highly capable engineers, experienced food executives, and investors from some of the best-known venture firms in Silicon Valley all participate in building something that looks ridiculous the moment you see the cheap experiment?
So we are not prosecuting the juicer.
We are reconstructing the crime scene.
Much better.
Start with Doug Evans. Before Juicero, Evans helped build Organic Avenue, a cold-pressed juice business in New York. So his starting complaint was not invented in a brainstorming workshop. Making fresh juice at home is annoying. You buy a pile of produce, you wash it, you chop it, you feed it through a juicer. You get pulp everywhere. Then you clean a machine with 6 damp components that all seem specifically designed to trap celery fibers.
I already support the founder.
Exactly. His proposed customer outcome was reasonable. Fresh juice, quickly, without the preparation and cleanup. And there is a clever part of the system that tends to disappear when people tell the Juicero story. The pack. Instead of buying 8 ingredients, the customer receives a sealed pack containing the right amount of chopped produce. Recipe handled. Portion handled. Sourcing handled. Preparation handled. Waste reduced. Cleanup mostly handled.
So if we stopped the story right there, we might have a product.
Possibly. We do not know if the economics work, but the value proposition is at least legible. Then comes the move that matters. Evans knew fresh produce and food operations. What he said he did not know was how to create enough mechanical force to cold press the produce. So that became an engineering problem.
How much force?
Up to about 8,000 pounds.
To make 1 glass of juice.
Yes.
I feel the episode drifting back toward prosecution.
Stay with me. Juicero assembled serious technical talent. Evans described roughly 12 PhDs, 45 engineers, and 7 food scientists. They worked through about a dozen designs. And there's a detail from Evans himself that I think matters enormously. He said his original core sketch and the final machine were very, very similar.
Wait. 12 design iterations, dozens of engineers, huge amounts of money, and the basic solution frame stayed roughly the same?
That is what he described. And that does not prove nobody challenged the premise internally. We do not have their private product meetings. But from outside, it suggests a possibility we see constantly in product development. Iteration happened inside the solution. How do we make the press stronger? How do we make it safer? How do we make the door survive the load? How do we scan the pack? How do we connect the machine? How do we make it beautiful? Those are all legitimate questions, but they are downstream questions.
The upstream question being, do I need this machine at all?
Or more precisely, what part of this system actually creates enough customer value to justify its cost and complexity? Now, if you want to see what happens when an engineering team is allowed to answer downstream questions with almost no constraint, look at the teardown. Hardware investor Ben Einstein dismantled a Juicero press after the hand squeeze story broke. He did not find junk. He found engineering. A lot of engineering. He described it as among the most complex consumer products he had taken apart. Large machined aluminum structures, a custom gearbox, hardened steel gears, a custom high-voltage power supply, a motor, sensors, electronics, Wi-Fi, a QR scanner, a microprocessor, a complicated locking mechanism, beautiful plastics. The machine was not a scammy plastic box. It was an extremely serious answer to a questionable question.
Which is almost worse.
Educationally, yes, because bad engineering is easy to diagnose. Good engineering applied to the wrong problem is much more dangerous.
And expensive.
Very. Einstein's diagnosis was that unconstrained development can be lethal. Juicero raised roughly $120 million before shipping a unit. That money did not just buy the press. It bought farms and supplier relationships, food processing, custom packaging, software, a mobile experience, a subscription system, a delivery operation, a fresh food supply chain. At one point, the company was operating a fresh production facility of more than 100,000 square feet.
So this is no longer a kitchen gadget company.
Correct. It is hardware plus food manufacturing plus logistics plus software plus subscription commerce.
That sounds horrifying.
It also sounds investable.
Explain.
Because viewed from the right angle, Juicero contained several patterns investors already liked. First, connected consumer hardware. Second, recurring consumables. Sell the machine once, then sell the customer packs repeatedly. Think coffee pods. Third, health and wellness. Fourth, software and data. Fifth, a founder with actual category experience and enormous conviction. And sixth, a much bigger story than juice. The company talked about changing how fresh produce is delivered and consumed.
So the machine is the beachhead.
Exactly. Kleiner Perkins later described Evans's pitch as one of investor Randy Komisar's favorites. There is a funny detail. Evans apparently used to bring juice samples when pitching investors. Before the Kleiner meeting, airport security confiscated them, so he arrived without his normal demonstration, and still won the room through conviction and analogies.
I am beginning to see how this happens.
That is the point. You do not pitch, "I need a $700 machine to squeeze this bag." You pitch a system. Fresh produce directly from farms, perfect recipes, no prep, no cleaning, connected food safety, recurring delivery, personalized consumption data, eventually other fresh food categories. And suddenly the press is not evaluated as a press. It is evaluated as the physical gateway to a platform.
The word platform has injured many innocent balance sheets.
It has. But Juicero's defense of the connected system was not entirely nonsense. The machine scanned the pack. That meant it could recognize what was being pressed. The company said it could stop expired or recalled packs from being used. Usage data could help manage a perishable supply chain. The machine produced consistent pressure. The app could remind customers that their packs were expiring. Those are real functions.
But now I want to separate two questions. Does the system contain useful things? And does that mean the press is worth $700?
Exactly. That separation is the whole case. A complex system can contain genuine value while one of its central components contributes far less value than everyone assumes. And when the component is surrounded by enough useful infrastructure, it becomes surprisingly difficult to isolate.
Especially after you have spent $100 million building everything around it.
Now we get to the pack. The pack may have been the actual product innovation. It solved a lot of the original customer problem before the machine did anything. The produce had already been sourced, already selected, already washed and processed, already portioned. already combined into a recipe. The customer did not need to clean a conventional juicer full of pulp afterward.
So, what exactly does the press add?
Pressure, consistency, some extraction, connected control, and theater.
Theater.
Do not underestimate theater in consumer products. Put a sealed pack into a beautiful machine. Press a button. Watch juice appear. That ritual can be part of the experience. The problem is not that those benefits are zero. The problem is whether they are worth hundreds of dollars of hardware complexity, and whether that hardware is necessary to make the business work.
Which brings us back to the hands.
Bloomberg reporters took Juicero packs and squeezed them manually. They got nearly the same amount of juice, sometimes about as fast or faster than the machine. At least 2 investors reportedly said they had not understood that customers could get similar output that way.
I want to sit with that. Because this company had investors, a board, executives, engineers, scientists, customers, and a working product. And a journalist appears with the experimental apparatus known as fingers.
That is why the story is funny. But the funny part is also the serious part. Good product experiments often look embarrassingly primitive. If the critical assumption is, customers need powered hardware to extract acceptable juice from this pack, then the first experiment should not be a beautiful connected appliance. It should be the cheapest thing capable of falsifying that assumption. Bag. Hands. Glass. Stopwatch. Maybe a simple manual press. Then ask customers whether they care about the difference.
What would that experiment have cost?
Almost nothing compared with the development program.
And what would it have told them?
Not that Juicero was definitely a bad business. That distinction matters. It would have told them that the role of the machine needed to be justified much more carefully. Maybe the answer becomes a cheap countertop frame, maybe a manual lever, maybe a small commercial machine for offices and hotels. Maybe the packs are the business. Maybe the machine is subsidized. Maybe there is no machine at all. The point of the experiment is not to kill the founder's dream. It is to keep the company from becoming emotionally and financially dependent on one implementation of the dream.
But by launch, the press was $699.
Yes. The price was later cut to $399, earlier than the company had originally planned for a lower-cost version. That alone does not prove the product was failing. Companies cut prices for many reasons, but the economics kept becoming harder to defend. The packs themselves were recurring purchases. The company needed fresh operations and refrigerated logistics. The machine was expensive, and the consumer had to commit to the whole system.
Which is where my department finally gets invited into the story. Let us say the customer likes juice. They pay hundreds of dollars for access to the system. Then they pay repeatedly for proprietary packs. Meanwhile, the company has to manufacture hardware, maintain software, process fresh produce, manage spoilage, ship perishable products, and support the installed base. That is an impressive collection of gross margin enemies.
And by the end, reporting suggested Juicero was losing around $4 million a month. The company eventually shut down after raising about $134 million in total.
Did the hand squeeze article kill it?
Probably not by itself. The company already had a cost structure, pricing challenge, and difficult scaling problem. The article did something more precise. It destroyed the story that made the complexity feel inevitable.
That is good.
Before the article, you could look at the machine and say, of course it is complex. Fresh, cold-pressed juice is difficult. Of course it is expensive. This is version 1. Of course it is connected. Food safety and supply chain data matter. Of course the company needs capital. Look at the infrastructure required. Then the bag gets squeezed by hand. Suddenly, every downstream decision is forced to answer a primitive question again. Why is the press here?
And once a $700 component has to answer that question directly, because the whole ecosystem is valuable, is not enough.
Exactly. This is the mistake I want to extract from Juicero. They may have confused the value of the system with the necessity of each component in the system. The packs could be useful. The delivery could be useful. The recipes could be useful. The food safety controls could be useful. The app could be useful. The farm relationships could be useful. The data could be useful. And because all of those things are potentially useful, the entire system can feel validated. But validation does not automatically transfer from the system to the most expensive component.
There is another uncomfortable piece here. Money.
Yes. People usually describe capital as something that lets startups move faster, but constraints can be useful. If you have very little money, you are forced to ask ugly questions early. What can we fake? What can we do manually? What can we remove? What must be true before we spend another dollar? What is the cheapest test that could prove us wrong?
Whereas if someone gives you enough money, you can answer uncertainty with engineering.
Exactly. You can make the uncertain thing stronger, smarter, better connected, better designed, more scalable. And each improvement creates evidence of progress. Look at everything the team shipped. Look at the patents. Look at the facility. Look at the app. Look at the machinery. Look at the supply chain. The danger is that progress on execution can psychologically substitute for progress on validation.
The company is moving incredibly fast, possibly in the wrong direction.
That is the sentence. And this is not just a Silicon Valley problem. A small business does it when it spends months designing a restaurant before testing whether anyone wants the menu. A software founder does it when they build permissions, billing, integrations, and dashboards before 5 users care about the core workflow. An engineer does it when they optimize materials before proving the governing physical mechanism. A corporate team does it when a project acquires staff, suppliers, and executive sponsorship before anyone wants to reopen the original assumption.
And each new commitment makes reopening it more painful.
Yes, because now the assumption is supporting careers, budgets, timelines, and identity. That is why a good development process keeps returning to the governing assumption deliberately. Not because the team is indecisive, because the cost of being wrong rises as the project becomes more sophisticated.
So, what would a competent sequence for Juicero have looked like?
Start with the customer outcome. Fresh juice with almost no preparation and cleanup. Then break the system into value-producing components. Produce pack. Delivery. Press. App. Food safety layer. Ask what each contributes, then attack the most expensive assumptions first. Can the pack produce acceptable juice without powered hardware? Can a cheap manual mechanism do it? Do customers care about the extraction difference? Will they buy packs at the required recurring price? Will they consume enough each week? Does the convenience change behavior? Does B2B value the food safety and labor savings more than consumers do?
And only after those survive do I earn my 8,000 pounds of force.
Correct.
I would like that embroidered on the engineering department wall.
There is also a charitable counterfactual here. Juicero may have contained a viable business that got buried by its original architecture. Imagine the company discovers early that consumers love the prepared packs, but do not value expensive powered pressing. Maybe the product becomes a low-cost manual appliance. Maybe offices and hotels get the connected machine because consistency, labor, and food safety matter more there. Maybe the consumer product is completely different. Maybe the company stays regional long enough to learn the fresh food economics. We cannot know whether any of those businesses would have worked, but early falsification would have preserved the option to find out.
Instead, the company made one version of the future increasingly expensive to abandon.
Exactly. That is the Juicero lesson. Not do not build ambitious hardware. Not venture capital is stupid. Not even never add Wi-Fi to a kitchen appliance. The lesson is simpler. Every project has a governing assumption. Something must be true for the rest of the work to matter. Find it, test it cheaply, and keep testing it as the product evolves. Because the dangerous outcome is not failure. The dangerous outcome is becoming extremely good at solving a problem that turns out not to require your solution.
And if somebody can invalidate all that work with 2 hands and a drinking glass,
You wanted that experiment much earlier.
I still cannot believe the bag.
Neither could the investors.